Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. It was finally time for a long-awaited vacation. I really deserved it, and I had been looking forward to it for months. I decided to rent a cozy cottage Airbnb nestled deep within the forest, far away from the mundane city life. It had been ages since I had spent time in nature, and I was eager to escape the stress that had accumulated over the past year. Little did I know, this seemingly perfect retreat would turn into a nightmare that would haunt me for the rest of my life. The day I had arrived at the cottage was beautiful and sunny. The dense foliage cast dappled shadows onto the winding dirt road that led me to my destination. As I pulled up to the property, I couldn't help but admire the attractive, rustic look of the cottage. The wooden exterior was weathered but well-maintained, and ivy crept up the sides, adding to its appeal. Eager to settle in and start exploring, I quickly unpacked my bags and went for a walk in the surrounding woods. The forest was incredibly serene, with the only sounds being the rustling leaves, chirping birds, and my footsteps crunching the fallen leaves beneath me. As the sun began to set, I headed back to the cottage, feeling refreshed and invigorated. I spent the evening preparing a delicious meal and relaxing by the fireplace. I decided to turn in early, looking forward to the restful sleep that I had been craving for so long. The first disturbance happened that very night. I woke suddenly disoriented and drenched in sweat. My heart was pounding hard. I dismissed the feeling as paranoia, chalking it up to being alone in a new place. I got up to grab a glass of water and noticed that the front door was slightly ajar. I was sure I had locked it before going to bed, but I tried to convince myself that I had simply forgotten. I locked the door, double-checked the windows, and went back to sleep. The next day, I tried to put the strange feeling from the night before behind me. I spent the day exploring the nearby trails, taking photographs, and enjoying the solitude. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I returned to the cottage and made myself dinner. Exhausted from the day's activities, I fell into a deep sleep. That night, I had vivid and disturbing nightmares. I dreamt of shadowy figures lurking in the woods, their eyes glowing menacingly. Each time I tried to escape, they would move closer and closer, their sinister presence growing stronger. I jolted awake, my heart pounding, but this time harder, and maybe the dreams had been more than just illusions of my imagination. As the days went by, the unsettling occurrences became more frequent. I discovered strange, unidentifiable footprints outside the cottage, and I had the sensation of being followed and stalked. My sleep was fitful and plagued by night terrors, and I started to hear unexplained noises in the night. Whispers seemed to echo through the trees, and I would catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye. The once peaceful forest now felt oppressive and menacing. I decided to search the cottage for any possible explanations, and that's when I stumbled upon a hidden room. It was tucked away behind a bookcase, and the air inside was stale and heavy. The room contained a single dusty table, upon which lay a collection of old photographs, newspaper clippings, and an ancient-looking journal. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me, and I started to examine the contents. The newspaper clippings detailed a series of unsolved disappearances that had taken place in the area over the past few decades. Each article recounted the chilling stories of hikers and vacationers who had vanished without a trace, leaving only a few personal belongings behind. The photographs were even more disturbing. They were candid shots of the missing individuals, taken from afar, as if they were being watched by someone or something. My hands shook as I picked up the journal, and I hesitantly began to read. The journal belonged to the cottage's previous owner, who had been obsessed with the idea that a malevolent entity resided deep within the forest. He believed that this creature, a shapeshifter that took on the form of its victims' deepest fears, was responsible for the disappearances. The more I read, the more my terror grew. The entries described the same unnerving experiences I had been encountering since my arrival. The sensation of being watched, the mysterious footprints, the nightmares. The last entry in the journal was dated just a week before the owner himself had gone missing. It was a frantic, almost illegible scrawl, detailing his plan to confront the entity and put an end to the terror it had inflicted upon so many innocent people. He never returned, and his fate remained unknown. I realized then that I couldn't stay in that cottage any longer. I hastily packed my belongings, my heart pounding in my chest as I prepared to leave. I felt that the shapeshifter was lurking in the shadows, ready to strike. As I locked the cottage door for the last time, I heard a guttural growl in the distance, and I knew that I had to get out of there, and fast. I raced to my car, the once serene forest now a sinister maze that seemed to close in around me. The shadows shifted ominously, and I could feel the creature's malevolent presence growing stronger. I fumbled with my keys, my hands trembling with terror, and finally managed to start the engine. I sped down the dirt road, leaving the nightmare behind me, praying that I would make it out alive. I never looked back. I knew deep down that the entity would never truly be gone, that it would continue to haunt the forest and prey on the unsuspecting souls who ventured too far into its depths. I carry the memory of my encounter with me, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks just beyond the edge of our understanding. As much as I want to forget, I know that I never will. My experience at the cottage in the forest has left a permanent mark on me, a fear that lingers in the deepest recesses of my mind. I can only hope that by sharing my story, others will be warned of the dangers that lie hidden in the shadows, and that the horrors I faced will not be forgotten. My family and I had been planning to get away for quite some time, and we finally decided to rent a historic manor through Airbnb. The manor was located in a small, picturesque town, and the photos online showcased its old-world charm and elegance. We were excited to explore the history of the place and make some wonderful memories together. Upon arrival, we were awestruck by the grandeur of the manor. Its stone walls, intricate carvings, and well-manicured gardens were a testament to a bygone era. Our 2 children, aged 8 and 10, were ecstatic and couldn't wait to explore every nook and cranny of the massive estate. As we settled into the manor, a strange feeling began to envelop us. It was an unexplainable sensation, as if a heavy, invisible cloak had settled over the property. The air felt thick, and there was an ever-present feeling of disquiet that we tried to brush off as mere exhaustion from our long journey. However, as the days went by, the fear only intensified. We started to notice odd occurrences around the manor. Doors would creak open on their own, and cold drafts would sweep through the halls, seemingly out of nowhere. In the dead of night, we would hear footsteps echoing through the empty corridors, even though we were certain that everyone was asleep. Our youngest child, Lucy, seemed to be the most affected by the strange atmosphere. She had always been a cheerful, bubbly girl, but her demeanor began to change dramatically. She would often stare blankly into the distance, seemingly lost in her thoughts, and her appetite waned. At times, she would wander off on her own, only to be found in the darkest corners of the manor, seemingly entranced by something that we could not see. Her behavior became increasingly erratic, and we were concerned for her well-being. We tried to engage her in conversations and involve her in activities, but she seemed distant and uninterested. She would often wake up in the middle of the night, covered in sweat and trembling, but she would never tell us what had frightened her so. One day, while my wife and I were exploring the manor's extensive library, we stumbled upon a hidden room tucked behind a bookshelf. It was dimly lit and filled with dusty tomes, old artifacts, and peculiar drawings that adorned the walls. In the center of the room, a large, intricately designed wooden box caught our attention. Hesitantly, we opened it, revealing a collection of old documents and newspaper clippings. As we began to examine the contents of the box, a chilling narrative unfolded before our eyes. The manor had been home to a series of tragic events and unexplained deaths, dating back to the 18th century. Whispers of dark rituals, demonic possessions, and malevolent spirits played the history of the estate. The more we read, the more we realize that the manor was not just a beautiful relic of the past, but a place tainted by unspeakable horrors. It became clear to us that Lucy's strange behavior was not just a phase or the product of an overactive imagination. She was being tormented by something truly sinister. We decided that we could not stay at the manor any longer, and we began to make arrangements to leave as soon as possible. That night, as we packed our bags in a frantic haste, the atmosphere within the manor became more oppressive than ever. Shadows seemed to dance on the walls, and the air was thick with an electric tension. We could feel a malevolent presence bearing down on us, as it were trying to prevent us from leaving. As we prepared to leave, Lucy's behavior reached a terrifying crescendo. She began to speak in a language that we didn't quite understand, her voice guttural and unnatural. Her eyes seemed to lose their warmth, replaced by a cold, empty stare. My wife and I were terrified, unsure of how to help our daughter, but we knew that we had to get her out of that manor immediately. We hurriedly gathered our belongings and practically carried Lucy to the car, her body limp and unresponsive. As we pulled away from the manor, I glanced back at the imposing structure, and for a brief moment I could have sworn I saw a dark figure standing in one of the windows watching us leave. The further we drove away from the manor, the more Lucy seemed to return to her normal self. By the time we reached our home, she was smiling, laughing, and completely oblivious to the terrifying events that had just transpired. It was as if a dark cloud had been lifted from her, and our sweet, cheerful daughter had been returned to us. We never spoke of our experience at the manor again, not wanting to relive the nightmare that had unfolded within its walls. I did some research on the property and discovered that several other guests had reported similar experiences: fearfulness, unexplained occurrences, and even claims of possession. Eventually, the manor was removed from Airbnb, and its sinister history was left to fade into obscurity. To this day, I can't help but shudder when I think about the horrors that we faced in that manor. Our family vacation had turned into a brush with the supernatural, and we were lucky to have escaped unscathed. The experience has left an indelible mark on us, a chilling reminder of the unseen forces that lurk in the shadows of our world. Now, when we plan our getaways, we opt for modern hotels and bustling cities, far away from the dark history that haunted that manor. We cherish the memories we make together, and we're grateful that we were able to escape the darkness that threatened to consume our family. We can only hope that by sharing our story, others will be more cautious when choosing their vacation rentals, and that the horrors that lurk within the walls of the manor will remain locked away forever. For months, my family and I had been planning a trip to Spain, eager to explore the beautiful countryside and immerse ourselves in the vibrant culture. We decided to rent a stunning villa through Airbnb, located on the outskirts of a quaint, picturesque village. The villa boasted a private pool, lush gardens, and breathtaking views of the surrounding hills. It seemed like the perfect place to unwind and spend quality time together. As we arrived at the villa, we were awestruck by its beauty. The Spanish-style architecture, with its white walls and terracotta roof, blended seamlessly into the landscape. We couldn't wait to settle in and begin exploring the village and the nearby countryside. The first few days were idyllic. We enjoyed leisurely strolls through the cobblestone streets, indulged in delicious tapas, and soaked up the sun by the pool. However, as the days went by, we started to notice something unsettling. At first, it was subtle, a faint rustling in the bushes, an unexplained creaking sound in the night, the nagging feeling of being watched. We tried to dismiss these occurrences as mere coincidences, but they soon became impossible to ignore. One evening, as we were returning to the villa after a day of sightseeing, we noticed a figure standing in the shadows near the entrance. As we approached, the figure vanished, leaving us feeling rattled and on edge. We checked the entire property, making sure that all the doors and windows were locked, and tried to convince ourselves that it was just our imaginations playing tricks on us. But the strange events continued. We would find our belongings moved or missing, only to have them reappear in the most unlikely places. The once peaceful atmosphere of the villa was now tainted by an inexplicable sense of dread that seemed to hang in the air. As the stalker's presence became more persistent, we realized that we can't ignore the situation any longer. We decided to install security cameras around the property, hoping to catch a glimpse of the person who was tormenting us and put an end to the unnerving encounters. The very next day, we reviewed the footage from the security cameras, and what we saw sent chills down our spines. A man, his face obscured by a hood, had been lurking around the property, watching our every move. He seemed to know the layout of the villa intimately, and he would disappear into the shadows just before we would notice him. Terrified for our safety, we contacted the local police and shared the footage with them. They were unable to identify the man, but promised to increase patrols in the area and keep a close eye on the villa. While their presence was somewhat reassuring, we couldn't let our guard down that the stalker was always one step ahead of us. Despite the increased security measures, the stalker's relentless pursuit continued. He seemed to be growing bolder, leaving ominous messages scrawled on the villa's walls and even entering the property while we slept. We were no longer able to enjoy our vacation, constantly looking over our shoulders and jumping at the slightest sound. Desperate for answers, I began researching the history of the villa and the surrounding area. I discovered that the villa had been the site of a tragic event many years prior. The previous owner, a reclusive man with a troubled past, had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind a slew of unanswered questions and suspicions of foul play. The more I dug into the story, the more I became convinced that the man who had been stalking us was somehow connected to the villa's dark history. Perhaps he was seeking revenge or attempting to uncover some long-buried secret. Whatever his motives, it was clear that he wouldn't stop until he achieved his goal, or until we left the villa for good. Fearing for our safety and unable to enjoy our vacation any longer, we made the difficult decision to cut our trip short and return home. We packed our bags with heavy hearts, feeling defeated by the mysterious stalker who had turned our dream vacation into a living nightmare. As we drove away from the villa, I glanced back one last time, my eyes scanning the property for any sign of the man who had tormented us for the past week. The villa, once a symbol of relaxation and tranquility, now stood as a haunting reminder of the fear and discomfort that had plagued our stay. Upon our return home, we reported our experience to Airbnb and shared the details of the stalker and the villa's disturbing history. The listing was promptly removed, and an investigation was launched to uncover the identity of the man who had been watching us. Months have passed since our ill-fated trip to Spain, but the memories of our terrifying experience still linger. We are constantly reminded of the stalker who invaded our lives, casting a shadow over what should have been a blissful and carefree vacation. We have become more cautious and vigilant, always aware of our surroundings and the potential dangers that may be lurking just out of sight. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.